Reflecting on the various battles over the last decade, Chris Paul's entry into the Warriors feels almost like a dream. However, what Golden State is receiving is not the spectacular offensive maestro, but rather a not-so-tall 38-year-old point guard who has already shown some notable signs of slowing down. This leads us to a question. What can we expect from CP3, and how does he smoothly fit into the Warriors' scheme? When Steve Kerr, the Warriors' coach, was asked about the trade and the impact he thinks Chris Paul will bring, he was quite clear. The Warriors were the NBA's pace leaders last season, but they also topped the list in turnovers. Chris Paul offers an impressive ability to control the pace of the game and protect the ball in crucial moments. Even as he approaches the end of his career, CP3 remains one of the most skilled passers, decision-makers, and court leaders the game has ever had. With his incredible ball-handling skills, which allow him to navigate through even the tightest spaces with total confidence, Chris is a player who simply does not lose possession easily. As we delve into this new chapter, Warriors fans and basketball aficionados are tuned into Chris Paul's games with the Golden State Warriors. Chris Paul's start with the Warriors jersey has been promising, as seen in his debut during a preseason game against the Los Angeles Lakers. Chris Paul's performance was described as decent in his debut, having scored 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists in just 13 minutes of gameplay. Coach Steve Kerr expressed his admiration for the way Chris Paul plays, highlighting his ability to dictate the pace of the match and the ease with which he integrated into the team, even being a newcomer. In basketball, making the most out of every possession is vital, especially when the playoff atmosphere electrifies the arena. It's no mystery that Chris Paul targets the midcourt. At his peak, he had one of the deadliest mid-range games in the league, and although not at the same level, it's still very much present. Last year, he took about 7.5 mid-range shots every 75 possessions and made 48% of them. Only 11 other players reached both marks. His ability to blend this mid-range skill with his classic point guard abilities makes him an expert, tearing through opposing defenses. Talking about one of Chris Paul's skills. If the big men retreat, he simply positions himself at that elbow for a calm attack. If they advance, cutting space for a shot, he passes to the roller for an easy attempt at the rim. And if a big man tries to cover the midcourt, while another defender moves to mark the roller, he passes to the free shooter for a high-quality three-point shot. Lastly, if the big man decides to switch, even though not as agile as he was, Paul is still very capable of exploiting these discrepancies in isolation. Although most of his pick-and-roll plays happen within the arc, I believe he still has utility coming off high ball screens in a more open pick-and-roll setup, something the Warriors appreciate. He is a competent three-point shooter off the dribble to some extent, feeling comfortable stepping into them against lighter coverages. Chris Paul is known for his ability to create space with astute footwork, but it seems that time is starting to take its toll, reducing his efficacy somewhat. He has been missing out on some of these opportunities, but that doesn't mean defenses can relax. Age is an undeniable factor in basketball. Staying on the court for extended periods is not something Chris can do without taking some breaks. This was notably evident in the recent playoff campaigns with the Phoenix Suns, where he seemed to disappear during some sequences of the games, conserving energy to come back strong in the final quarter. This strategy works now and then, but it's not foolproof. Injury concerns add a question mark. Although he has been relatively healthier in recent years, the question of durability remains. The last year was perhaps the first time we saw his age weighing on the court. The 2023 version of Chris Paul showed itself quite different from what he presented in his previous 2 years with the Suns. However, as Steve Kerr said, CP3 is a player who always gives a good chance of getting a good shot, especially with his pick-and-roll game. But Golden State has never been heavily reliant on a dominant and spread pick-and-roll game. So bringing Paul into the game, while taking advantage of his skills, is an interesting story to follow as the season progresses. So, how does this skill set fit into the picture? The idea is that he will be the maestro of the second unit, which is crucial, as there's a tendency to crumble whenever Steph steps out for a rest on the bench. Since 2021, the Warriors displayed a luxurious offensive rating with Steph in action, but that falls off when they are without him. Shifting the focus back to CP3, he still has the spark to dismantle reserve units, and I would argue that the logic is his mastery in the pick-and-roll game could be key to unlocking the vigor of youngsters like Jonathan Kuminga, serving as a dizzying threat and an explosive roller, or Moses Moody as a sniper and a quick trigger weapon. The dynamics of the pick-and-roll also inject a new element into their formations at the start and end of games. At times, the movement can stagnate or defenses may fare well in marking, creating an alternative route to explore when the tide gets rough. To me, it's crystal clear that Paul will deliver most of his value with the ball in his hands, but the question remains, how does he fit into the fluid offense when sharing the court with the main trio? There's an almost total absence of off-ball movement in his game. He's not a threat on cuts or finishes at the rim. So often, he stands still, waiting for the actions to unfold. Despite these pause moments, he is a respectable threat to close out plays due to his long-distance aim. Since 2021, he converted 45% of his three-point shots when well free and 46% of his three-point shots jumping and shooting. Now, 205 catch-and-shoot attempts over 3 seasons may not seem like a substantial sample, but he has consistently stood out in this department since stats began to be recorded. Even being often the shortest player on the field, Chris Paul's staying power cannot be ignored. When faced with a block, it's likely that he'll get stuck, which results in less resistance at the first point of attack. However, one of his advantages lies in his tactical discernment and dexterity in executing switches after the block. He's agile to pick up the ball, attempting to maintain position, and if he's surpassed, knows when to retreat to the roll. His stature may not allow dominant resistance, but being in the right place at the right time can make a big difference. This quality of his harmonizes well with the Warriors' philosophy. They have always counted on a solid defensive scheme, astutely orchestrated by Draymond, making the transition to Paul less intimidating. Another notable trait of Paul is his ability to steal the ball. His hands are always in motion, seeking an opportunity to intercept or slap the ball, which sometimes allows him to balance the challenge. Despite these merits, a large part of his time on the field is spent marking less threatening offensive players in the corner. Usually, this area is designated to secondary rim protectors who can help in baseline rotations. However, measuring 6 feet on a good day, Paul does not offer this kind of rim protection, but his position behind the play provides him a privileged view of the ongoing action. Along with his high tactical discernment, he is also one of the most communicative players on the field, constantly directing traffic and making calls that, although they don't appear in the stats, contribute significantly to improving the team's defensive posture. In these defensive roles, even without a dominant presence near the basket, his precise rotations and active hands become a source of destabilization, often denying opponents easy opportunities at the rim. Chris Paul is unquestionably a detail-oriented player, performing each action with notable precision. But recovering after assisting in defense seems to be a challenge for Paul. If the opponent is a taller shooter, it almost seems like Paul's presence is disregarded. His lack of height and wingspan prevents him from offering substantial resistance against shots. Now, where does this place Paul and the Warriors in the overall picture? The Warriors have a peculiar defensive style where Paul's sharp rotations, active hands, and overall defensive genius are a huge advantage. However, these physical limitations may dictate the types of formations they can present. There's debate over an ultra-small lineup. The team may struggle to close possessions with rebounds, and relying on Paul to be a legitimate perimeter stopper may not be realistic at this point. But with a bit more defensive structure, size, and athleticism on the field, I believe the situation is not so dire. Keeping Paul away from the main ball handlers could alleviate some of these defensive problems. Now, are you liking Chris Paul on the Golden State Warriors? Leave your opinion in the comments and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.